YouTube, welcome back to week 5 of 52 Weeks Friday. If you're following along with this challenge, how are you doing with it? Let me know. Anyway, week 1 was drink more water. Week 2's challenge was get more sleep. Week 3 was to get off the couch, and week 4 was to keep a food journal. Since I don't want these videos to be 5 hours long as more and more weeks go by, I'm going to try to keep it brief. Nothing new for weeks 1 through 3. If you want to see my thoughts on those challenges or what I am doing to meet them, check out the previous 52 Weeks Friday videos. As for week 4, keeping a food journal. Sometimes I refer back to the book midway through these challenges to see if I can garner any new insight or if I missed anything. Like, did I fully understand what I was supposed to do? And that's a good reason, if you are interested in following along, that you buy the book. Anyway, I did have to do that this week. I reread through the chapter and I realized that I forgot to mention something in regards to keeping a food journal that the book recommends, which is to also rate your hunger on a scale of 1 to 5 as well as your emotional state. And that makes sense. Sometimes we continue to eat when we're full, or we eat for reasons other than hunger. And especially if you're an emotional eater, it may be a good idea to have an idea of what your patterns are. So for the last week, I have been keeping track of my food in a food journal. I did miss a couple of days, but since keeping a food journal is not new to me, I'm not going to be too hard on myself that I missed 2 out of 7 days. Because even the most diligent habits are skipped or forgotten from time to time. So because I am not new to food journaling, I really didn't have any insights over the last week that I wasn't already aware of. It was just sort of picking back up a habit that had fallen to the wayside for me over the last couple of months. But I did mention in my last video that I had mixed feelings on it, and I guess now is a good time to explain why. I have food journaled off and on for a few years now for a couple of different reasons. 1, to keep track of my calorie intake when I was on a bit of a weight loss journey, and 2, to keep track of any symptoms that could be related to food intolerances. I suffer from migraines, I have celiac disease, both of which lend themselves to keeping track of what I eat. And personally, I think these are 2 really good reasons to keep a food journal. It's also a great way to stay accountable and gain insight into your eating habits. It can better help you to see where you might be making some not so great choices or where there's room for improvement. I mean, I know for myself, it's really easy to forget about those 5 cookies that I mindlessly ate while I was putting away groceries. And while that might not be a big deal to everyone, it can be if you're trying to eat in a calorie deficit to lose weight. At the same time, I might feel confident that I'm meeting my nutrition goals. Like, of course I'm eating my fruits and veggies, but when I actually track it, I realize I haven't had a vegetable all week. Without tracking, it is surprisingly easy to both over or underestimate both the quantity and quality of your diet. So I do see a lot of value in food journaling, especially for people with dietary restrictions or specific health goals. The problem is that I think it can potentially contribute to an unhealthy mindset around food. So for example, you eat a cookie, so now you feel like you need to be good for the rest of the day. So now you're labeling foods as good or bad, or worse, labeling yourself as good or bad based on what you ate, and that's not healthy. I just think that if you are going to food journal, it's important to have a clear purpose and intent behind it. Whether your goal is to track calorie intake for weight loss, identify food intolerances, or improve your eating habits, because there is nothing wrong with wanting to increase your fruit and vegetable intake or reduce processed sugar. But ultimately, your purpose should shape how you journal. It's about using it as a tool that supports your health without adding extra stress. That said, I also think that if you have any sort of history with disordered eating, you avoid this challenge unless it has been recommended by a healthcare professional who can properly guide you. But I am going to continue to food journal because for me, I find it helps me to make better choices. Knowing that I've got to write this down makes me want to write something that I'm going to feel good about later. But what do you think about keeping a food journal? Yay, nay, let me know in the comments. I mentioned that the book provides extra credit challenges, so if you're already doing the recommended challenge, it's a way to take it a step further. Now, normally I don't get into these, but food journaling is, I feel, not uncommon. So the book suggests that if you're already food journaling, that you track your exercise, and that's certainly one option, but I would also recommend that you keep track of any symptoms, headaches, digestive issues, rashes, anything that could point to a food intolerance or trigger, as well as any vitamins or supplements that you take daily. As for the best way to food journal, whatever works for you. I have mentioned in other videos that I'm old school. I prefer a pen and paper to an app in most cases. I think it just works for my brain. So I am just using a notebook and pen, but there is nothing wrong with using an app. There's a ton out there, so long as it allows you to track what you want to track. MyFitnessPal is a good one, especially if you're tracking calories. Even their free version is pretty extensive, but that's really the only one that I have a lot of experience with, so I don't want to start like throwing out recommendations that I haven't tried. Like, I have tried a few, but they just weren't useful for my needs or what I wanted to track. So like I said, figure out what it is that you want to accomplish with the food journal and find an app that works for you. Or again, there's nothing wrong with an old-fashioned pen and paper. Okay, so now we are on to week 5. Have a positive outlook. Okay, cool. Challenge skip. See you next Friday for week 6. Okay, so I am not a pessimist. Bit cynical, but not a pessimist. It's cliche, but I really am a realist in every sense of the word. But you know, if you have anxiety, your brain automatically goes to worst case, which really doesn't lend itself to positive thinking. And just having mental health struggles as a whole can make it really difficult to maintain a positive outlook. But that doesn't mean that I wouldn't like to be more positive. The problem is that it's not as simple as waking up one day and saying, all right, I'm going to think positive from now on. Even for people without anxiety or mental health struggles, it's a skill. It's something that you have to practice and work on over time. So when you do have anxiety or mental health challenges and your brain is actively working against those thoughts, it's doubly hard. Now, normally I don't do this. This whole video is normally I don't do this, but usually I don't recommend what the book recommends. 1, I like to find my own ways to approach these challenges, and 2, if you're curious to know what it recommends, buy the book. I am defeating the purpose of you buying or even borrowing the book if I just paraphrase it all. But unlike going to bed an hour earlier or keeping a food journal, taking steps to improve your outlook isn't as tangible. So in this case, I do find the book's recommendations to be quite useful, and realistically, a quick Google search is going to give you pretty much the same information. So in this case, I think it's worth sharing a few suggestions to help get the ball rolling. So some ways to improve your outlook. Eliminate negative self-talk, or to keep on theme, engage in positive self-talk. So for example, instead of "I'm such an idiot," try "what went wrong and how can I avoid making the same mistake?" Similarly, use positive language. Replace "I can't" with "I'll try," or "I'm still learning" instead of "I'm terrible at this." Practice gratitude. I will be doing a video on this in the future, but write down like 1 to 3 things a day or 5 things at the beginning of each week that you're grateful for. Let go of things. You can't control everything, so worrying about the things you can't control creates unnecessary stress and contributes to a negative outlook. Focus on your strengths. Remind yourself of what you can do instead of what you can't. One thing I want to mention, especially if you suffer from anxiety, some of these things, positive self-talk, avoiding negative language, letting go of things, while great in theory, are in direct competition to how our brains are wired. So I want to recommend something for all of you anxious Annies out there. Work on cognitive behavior therapy. I have this book, the Anti-Anxiety Notebook. I will link it in the description, but it's pricey. But you don't need to buy a book. You might be able to find worksheets online or even just do this in a notebook. But basically, if you're not familiar with it, it helps you to shift your thinking patterns from like the anxiety-fueled negative to the more positive, or at least more realistic, which I think is a good first step to changing your outlook. It's also more concrete. Like if you don't have anxiety, you might just be able to mentally shift your thoughts, and over time your thought patterns will eventually evolve. But with anxiety, it helps to actually be working through these thoughts like a math problem. The other reason that I decided to go against the grain and share suggestions up front is that I think the best way to tackle this challenge is by having a game plan in mind that I'm committing to, rather than just finding what works for me. Like I said, unlike the other challenges, this one isn't concrete. It's not going to be measurable in a day or even a week. So starting with a clear approach from the get-go is probably going to yield better results than winging it. So if you are following along, whether you have the book or not, and if you don't like my strategies, try Googling some other ideas for improving your outlook and commit to that. If after a few weeks you don't notice any changes, then maybe try some other approaches. Wow, okay, I feel like this is gonna be like a really long video. As always, let me know what suggestions you have for this challenge, improving your outlook, in the comments. I shared mine, I would love to hear yours. On that note, if you enjoyed this video, if you got something out of it, please give it a like and a share. Don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss the next 52 Weeks Friday. And if you're following along with these challenges, leave me a comment and let me know how it's going and what you have learned so far. Thank you for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.